come to the last session of the day. It is my absolute honor and pleasure to invite Dr. Vijay Kelkar, who, among many other prestigious senior positions, was also the ex-chairman of the 13th Finance Commission, to this fireside chat on India's urban governance, past and the future. And Director Aromar Revi is going to be hosting this conversation. So welcome you both to the stage, and Aro and Dr. Kelkar, the stage is yours. Thank
Thank you, Pratigna. So the thing about Dr. Kelkar is, I mean, short of Manmohan Singh, he's done pretty much every single job in the government of India. And well, anyway, I shouldn't tell. So basically, across the spectrum, starting from work in the Planning Commission, the Secretary of Petroleum. In fact, whenever India has a petroleum crisis, this time the Brent goes about 70 or 80 or 90. Somebody picks up the phone and calls him from Delhi. Going on to be Chief Economic Advisor, Secretary Finance, India's representative at the IMF, etc., etc. He is one of the leading thinkers and actors on the economic stage in this country. And even though people are not very thrilled with the GST as it's currently implemented, he is the originator of the GST in a very different incarnation. So, I mean, we're very glad to have him in conversation with us. Vijay is also the Chancellor of the IIHS University, so we have this ongoing engagement on a whole range of urban questions. So just to set the context, I think which is going to be largely speaking from the macro perspective, from the Ministry of Finance or from, let's say, the RBI perspective of where this whole game is going, looking at, maybe a 50-year view of where Indian governance and process is going to be working on from the economic perspective. But just to step back, this is an ongoing conversation starting for the last few days that we've been having. We are at a fairly interesting time or difficult time, depending on where you look at it. So if you start from the top down, we're in an environment where the world was never flat, as Friedman had written about it many years ago. It was always very uneven, and India, of course, is even more uneven. But we are at a period of time just now where we may be on the threshold of a new Cold War. We're not sure about that. We don't know what's going to play itself out. Certainly, globalization, at least the last version that we had, is in serious trouble and is changing its form. Not only because of AI and a whole range of other things, but because of the trade blocks and the conflicts that are taking place. In this context, India now has a population which is equal to that, or a little bit more than China, equal to that of Africa in some senses. And we are setting out, or we have set out, on a journey of sort of doing what China has done since the 1990s. So China has been through the largest urbanization in the history of mankind, initiated by Deng Xiaoping starting in the late 1980s, 1990s. And that process has not only transformed China, but transformed the world. So the reason that we actually were able to achieve some elements of the Millennium Development Goals was because China lifted pretty much all of its people out of extreme poverty. Fine, we've done a lot in this country, but because of COVID and various other things, we have some retrogression actually going on at the current point of time. But much of that process happened in China because of the process of urbanization. It's linked to export-oriented development, the development of massive infrastructure that we've heard about in various cases. I guess one of the questions for us is the Indian way actually going to be very different? How can it be different? How does it fit within the constitutional frame? Because we are very different from China. We there's some things that are interesting to learn from them, but we're a very different country and economy and political economy. So, how does one play it out? And since Vijay has worked, at the apex of the system and as a constitutional authority, dealing with both vertical and horizontal balances, because that's the core question that we're going to be faced just now. As we step into the process of delimitation, which is, I think, going to be a very interesting process where many of us here are in the middle of a discussion with a whole range of people in Delhi, including the new Finance Commission, on what is urban and what is rural. So these are big questions that will determine what's happening, but also this grand bargain that we managed to strike between states in the south and the west, which have done better on human development, on economic development, on a whole range of things, and states in the north and the east who have done a little bit differently. How does one think about this question? How does one think about the process of urbanization? And India has a huge opportunity here because we do not need to replicate what happened, of course, in Europe and North America. It's kind of done and done with. What happened in Latin America, where Latin America hyper urbanized over 20 or 30 years, that created its own dynamic, including the serious dynamic which you find both in Brazil and Argentina of not only fiscal crisis, and Argentina is going through an interesting challenge at the moment, but also the creation and the takeover by authoritarian regimes in some senses. So the process of concentrating people creates economic growth, creates economic opportunities, does something to inequality sometimes, both positive and negative, but it also creates very interesting challenges in terms of stratification, inequality, and a whole range of other questions as far as that's concerned. So we have an opportunity now to rethink that process. We don't have to go the Chinese way, which is hyper urbanization, building mega urban regions which have, if you look at Beijing, Tianjin, etc., 150 million people. But we could go that way if you look at Bombay, Pune, Nasik, and that whole area. That's how does one keep the balance between the rural and the urban? What kind of governance frame needs to be addressed? And since many of us have been involved for many years just now at looking at the 73rd and the 74th Amendment, in fact, many of the discussions we've had over the last 2 years in the country have been partially in this room about how we can sort of reinvigorate the 74th. How does one think about these questions in an economic context, in a political context, certainly in a political economy context, and of course in a social context, in a country which has lots of young people where we're not producing enough jobs? We have a huge stratification in terms of access as far as some communities and certainly women are concerned. And some things are working well, but a whole range of other things are not working at all. And then, of course, you've heard all the nasty things we've been talking about since the morning. You have climate change and biodiversity crash and all the other kind of stuff that's there. So how does one sort of reconceive uh, the governance frame for a country where the frame was built based on the 1935 Government of India Act, the current constitution that we had, which had no imagination that we would be in the place that we are today? So is the frame robust enough to be able to manage its process, etc., or do we really have to rethink how the frame will be built, and what are the core elements of that, especially sort of in fiscal federalism, which Vijay has spent many years thinking about and actually trying to shape as far as this country is concerned, including GST. So Vijay, all yours. I think you're kind of live.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
First, I want to thank you for inviting me. In this group, one always feels younger. But so many times I told you, Arun, your colleagues, that at least in Bangalore, when they introduced me in one sentence, that I'm married to Rahul Dravid's sister. That gives much larger sympathy in the audience. So please don't make this mistake again. At least in this town. I won't insist in Pune, but in this town. No, I think there are lots of sort of thoughts come to one's mind in terms of issues which you raised. But, there's a story about a man who, partly my sin was I involved with the petroleum ministry. So person who's the chemical engineer who discovered the refinery, he was so fond of what he did, that he finally ended up using the residue which he used as a Vaseline. He used to take as a spray for his braid also, instead of. So that's happening with me. For me, other way of thinking about it is this: you're all young. You might have heard this beautiful song of Johnny Walker. The song called "Lakh Dukho Ki Ek Dawa Hai," and of course he was talking about Champi. It was Til Malish Champi. To my mind, Lakh Dukho Ki Ek Dawa Hai GST. And I think, and it has in fact a more important role to play to issues which you raised, because the basic problem in you outlined the challenges in terms of urbanization. Basic problem of creating quality public goods in urban areas is the total non-alignment with the incentives between who are consumer of this public goods and who are suppliers. And there are authorities which are trying to supply so far removed away from the consumer that there is no connect. So I think it's important to bring the supply and demand align themselves. And the missing link is really finance. The fiscal base of cities. And my favorite example, one of the great perquisite you get when you work with Finance Commission, is you visit all the state governments and state areas. When
Should be working.
hello?
Yeah, it's come back.
When we visiting Punjab, I went to my horror to Ludhiana, the highest number per capita basis Mercedes-Benz. Half of the city has no drainage facilities. So you have a rich city but poor municipality. And this is your core problem. That you are not equipping your city administration and city authorities with adequate resources which can be at their command, not can come in the largest. And flip side is, no citizens also take interest adequately as they should for the supply because they don't feel as much, there's no ownership in some sense. So one way of aligning this, what I call supply public goods and demand for public goods, is by making the GST available to the local bodies as their assigned resources. Today, according to Constitution, the Finance Commission distributes resources in only two tiers administration, namely state and center. At least for GST, which is a consumption tax, which is beautiful. It's beautiful tax in that sense because it aligns interests of the citizens and the authorities, is consumption tax. So what I've been arguing that you must allow the share of GST with all the three tiers of the government, central, state, and local areas. And my favorite theme has been in the last several years that have a simple tax, namely 1%, only 12% tax. And then you can divide either 444 or 552, that is negotiated settlement. But even if you take conservative estimate 2% going to third tier, it roughly means 1% of GDP, roughly, which is more than today's market, $30 billion. Now just imagine if that money is available to the decision makers, what transformation can happen. Because they can, more beautifully, they can access the capital market. The most important instrument in US capital market is what they call municipals. It's the municipal bonds which they generate in the marketplace. Because the reason they could do it because they have a fiscal base. So with this, even if it is conservative, I know somebody, our RBI colleague may say it's too ambitious. Even if it is conservative 1-to-2 ratio, for $30 billion, you can $15 billion you can raise for the market every year. Now just imagine what it means to the infrastructure.
We are currently
So-
about 1% at the moment of GDP. So
Exactly.
1 more percent is 2.
Yeah.
You leverage it up, you're at 3.
Yeah.
Then you start going towards, where South Africa and many other
Correct.
countries are actually are.
So that's what can happen, and it requires only tweaking two articles. Then I'll give exact which articles to be tweaked. This is our colleague Vidhi has helped me on this. Vidhi, as you heard, this is people, very bright young lawyers in Delhi. So they
243.
286 and 243 both H and X. This will create first consolidated fund for third year. Because money should go to where? So consolidated fund to third tier happens with, and other articles which enables that the transfer goes directly to them rather than routed to state governments. But today SFCs, money then go, state government gives the money, there's no automaticity in this. Or even finance comes, the grants are automatic. So these two articles needs to be amended, and we'll find fiscal base will be available. If anybody asks here that who is the mayor of New York, probably many of the people will respond, but they won't know who's the mayor of Bangalore because there is no authority, there are no resources. So mayor has to be in US. I remember I was a student when I was a student in USA. In US politics, New York mayor was far more important than many other politicians in that. Or Chicago. Chicago mayor Delhi, in fact, decided that Kennedy should become president, became president. It was government. So these mayors are extremely powerful because they have access to resources. So that's where the politics will take place. And as I said, demand for improvement also improves because human becomes taxpayer. Today, income tax, unfortunately, our levels of exemption are so high that the tax base is very small. What? Not 1% population or 2%. But GST each one of us pay. So I'm a stakeholder in better governance. So you improve the demand for governance, supply governance, if you borrow economics language, and that's better outcome. So I think we have to educate our people that demand is a simple demand, make our cities financial, and that will also help with third term is also the local bodies, panchayat also. I'm not saying only cities. Empower your cities, and fortunately, because of the participation of women, now more than 50% probably panchayat, at least sarpanchas are women. And there's a lot of adequate data show that when women are heading the panchayats, the public goods are much better quality and higher levels of efficiency. So it will improve efficiency in every sense of the term in terms of empowering your local bodies through finance. So it's not a very, it's not impossible to do. We did for GST. It means some people lose power, but others will gain it. So we have to balance this, create these new demanders in the political market so that change will come. But I think more we educate our people, more discuss about it, demand will come. Just remember, I'm sure you must have read it. Who were the mayors in the old days? Jawaharlal Nehru, mayor of Allahabad. Subhash Chandra Bose, mayor of Kolkata. Sardar Patel, mayor of Ahmedabad. Nariman, mayor of Mumbai. Pune mayor was Gadge, who later became the central minister. So this kind of people were attracted to local politics. That time, of course, that was major avenue. But what I'm saying, this kind of people again will get attracted to our local politics, and will get better supply of local goods. So my mind, we have to educate as much as possible. Give only one, just give resources in the hands of the third tier, and empower them, because otherwise they don't have quality, etc. They will come. That's why British was denying us even independence, because natives don't know how to rule themselves. But that's absurd argument. I think we empower our local bodies. It is possible. It's their money. We are not their own money. They should have access to it. So I have a very simple formula, as I told you.
So your position in this debate we've had with Dr. Ravindra and Lakshmi earlier is that if the resources flow, then the politics and the political economy will shift.
Will improve.
The counter position is, yes, the resources are important, but if you actually don't change the frame, which includes the constitutional amendment and everything that goes along with that.
Without that, it can't happen. Constitutional amendment is sine qua non. Without that, this can't happen logically. But to my mind, is a starting point. Once the resources come, you'll see the dramatic change. People who likes to, our two distinguished colleagues would have loved to work in the city where they grew up. Why go to Delhi to work? Instead, you know why people live in Delhi, Lakshmi? Do you know the theory? The length of years you live in Delhi, like he lived and I lived for many years, depends on the sins of your last birth. So until you do Papak Shalan, you can't go back. But the GST will change. We don't have to go to Delhi. We can be our own town.
That's true. That's
and have a same high quality. Today, why only broader avenues available in Raisina village? Because they have money.
So now your argument may actually find some ground in more urbanized states like Tamil Nadu, maybe Maharashtra. I'm not so sure about that. But why would a state like Bihar or Orissa, which has such a small set of people who are living in urban areas, buy this argument? Because because for panchayats you have a very large spread that you're going to set the resources out to, so you may not find the difference. So the centrally sponsored schemes, all the other things that are going into the panchayats,
but even the people in Bihar are seeing future. The youngest seeing the future. They say this was the future. Future of the cities, and they want high quality public goods. So I don't think. Now I didn't know. I was corrected recently. One of your colleagues sitting here, she's from Orissa. My memory was 15 years ago in Orissa, and I was worried about it. She said no, world has changed. So Orissa is booming. So don't just sort of say Bihar can't change. Of course, Bihar can. If money is available, it will change faster.
But
So,
would it be incentivized enough to be able to buy this argument? Because eventually it is a debate in the GST Council. It is a separate debate that will happen within the Finance Commission of how vertical and horizontal transfers will take
you
place.
see, you have to talk, and talk. I mean, persuade. And that's the only solution we have.
Fair enough.
And I think I have a great faith in our innate genius of our people. They'll see the thing, and there will be a momentum for this. And enough people don't require 100% conversion. Even enough people are there, change will come.
So one mechanism is GST. The second, do you think that there is the flow of funds that come through the intergovernmental fiscal system within
That
the
doesn't come because even that require amendment. Because today what happens, only recently I found, I was talking to 16th Finance Commission chairman was here other day.
Yeah.
So I was happened to meet him and I had breakfast with him. He said, Vijay, all Finance Commission grants which are approved, they are never given by central government to state governments. Money does not flow, which in turn state government and give to municipalities. So you have to have very alert kind of citizenry. But I'm not saying this happen tomorrow. But to me, this is a precondition. And I'm now living in Pune and I see the deterioration of Pune as a city. And the public goes in shambles. And unless you have a empowered, because Mumbai has no interest. Municipal commissioner in Pune lives for 2 years as CL by the Mumbai, his chief secretary. He's not interested. With all due respect, all well-meaning people, but incentives are not there. So to create incentives, the incentives will come if their resources are available.
Agreed. So paraphrase that. Restructure GST, rule-based transfers to the third tier,
Yes.
create the capacity in that. Make sure that the Finance Commission transfers are actually delivered,
Correct.
are not intimidated and not
That was
transferred by the state finance commissions.
Yes.
Again, going to the lower tier as far as that's concerned. Then set up a system so that you can actually leverage the market, assuming that your balance sheet of your cities, and even
You can
even the
go
top
raise the
100,
market. Yeah, you can raise the market.
we've tried that. We tried on that. In fact, it was part of a discussion today. Last year we had a long discussion on this, on looking at how one can actually access the market from the balance sheet of the cities themselves. And then on top of that, there's a big question we dealt with in the morning, which is of infrastructure financing. Fine. So it's when you add all of these things up, the GST, the Finance Commission transfers, the budgetary transfers that may or may not come in some senses from state or otherwise, and the ability to leverage funds, plus the private investment, then you actually have a portfolio that you can play with.
Correct.
Fine.
And giving powers to, sharing powers with the mayors and today mayors have no power.
But
They should appoint a CEO. First, simple, this should make a change. CEO should be appointed by the elected municipal corporation members.
That's a very
Simple.
tough. That's a very tough one. And I mean, we've had this discussion earlier. Amnan and other colleagues have been part of that process.
And when my senior colleagues are here, they would know the most important instrument is writing CR. Who writes your CR?
Yes, that's true.
That's the instrument that moves the system.
But that is deeply threatening, I would say, to be fairly blunt about it, both to the political class, not only at the municipal level, but at the MLAs, and secondly, even to the bureaucracy. I still remember, we took a whole set of folks who were pretty senior from the IIHS in 2015 to South Africa. And the thing that really shocked them was, first thing, South Africa has empowered mayors. In fact, the mayor of Johannesburg, we brought him in and he came to the academy and we had a very good discussion in Mussoorie on that. The second thing that really shocked them was that actually South Africa doesn't have a permanent civil service. So that, how can you run a country without a permanent civil service? And the third thing is that more than the mayors, the managers of South African cities are actually paid an immense amount of money. The mayor of Johannesburg at that point of time was probably paid maybe $175,000,
Correct.
etc. Because the city manager of Johannesburg was in charge of all, investment, mobilization, what the Department of Economic Affairs and the PMO effectively do in the country at the moment, and delivery. And, frankly, they can be sacked if they didn't work otherwise. So they have a professional cadre to manage that, just like many other places.
That's where the role of IIHS comes. We will be creating managers for this. That's why we created this institution. And IIHS will play a role that when you're empowered cities, that you have corresponding skill set.
How do so fair enough. I mean, so we can train the people and young people can go out there and we have the skills. The question is for people, especially here who've led large scale reforms, and there are at least half a dozen people in the room at the moment. How does one be able to shift the narrative so that the incentives within the political class, fine, and also in the bureaucracy can shift so this kind of stuff can happen? Because this discussion went pretty much all the way up, I think, year before last, on the 75th year of Indian independence, to the highest level in the government, and then we chickened out.
But I don't know, maybe I'm out of sync, but what I'm seeing happening in this country is really we're sitting on the volcano, which is going to explode. I mean, then they may wake up.
So
the
you're saying
wake up call will come.
we need
Don't
a 91 kind of crisis to effect
it's
the
really
devolution.
brewing. I can say small place for Pune. I see that happening. It can happen, and Mumbai is certainly sitting. Bangalore is no different. So,
So
what a million mutinies may take place, I don't know. But how the system will work it out. We can do it in a planned way, or we're forced to change it.
so that's a Sri Lanka model at the current point of time, right?
We don't
So
know.
people who want to make the change, organize stuff, get everything in place, and then something is going to blow up sometime, and maybe you have a
No,
regime
I think
change, and then you have an opportunity to make it happen.
it's really dire straits are there.
No, the reason I'm asking this question is, even in the political system at the moment, we do not have representation at the state level, fine, for cities. Huh? Some states have a
Yeah.
bicameral legislature. There's no space for that. You have place for teachers, you have space for all kinds of other people, but you don't have space for mayors. You don't have space for people who come from the cities. Is there a hope in that space?
No.
Because Rajya Sabha doesn't do that for you, fine.
No, but we can have a different bicameral system, bicameral governance for states, and have a mayors elected, third tier electing their members to the second house. Two houses.
This
I
is
don't
how
know.
the European Union handles it. They
But
have an entire
we can think
council
of,
with this.
in fact, that's what we're going to organize. I'm involved with a small group in Pune called Pune Indian Center. We're going to have a discussion on delimitation. And one of the issues we're raising this in Professor Palishikar, who has written a basic paper. We have to start thinking about the bicameral system, not only at the center, but at the states also.
At the states, exactly. So I'm saying that if you have a really brave or foolhardy chief minister, because can be done at the state level, fine. So your second house actually can have formal representation as you do your delimitation from cities.
Let me tell you, we should not be so pessimistic. Yashwant Savan as a chief minister, also in this state, Hegde,
Yeah, that's a long time
they were
ago.
chief minister, but they were not. They're quite willing to empower the younger leadership. The entire the Maharashtra experiment of ZP, Jilla Parishad, and Jilla Parishad were vibrant institutions, and it was created by Yashwant Savan as chief minister. He didn't feel threatened. Yes, then Mr. Antul became chief minister, and he felt threatened. And then he ensured that it's changed. That's really the tragedy of Maharashtra. But while he was there, while Yashwant Savan was, the system was there, he never felt threatened by these developments, because in fact he saw as a way of it's like
a
academy for politicians. That's how it's going to grow and sort of become the managers.
Because you have to create this pipeline, because the challenges that we face both in the urban economy and of course in the regional economy in some senses have to have people like the Chinese have done in many cases, who have the experience and the confidence to take some of these things, and that comes up from sort of local democratic activity, the ability to implement. Because the other question that's come up again and again in discussion today and earlier here is, one of the challenges we have today is we're able to implement and execute stuff in silos, increasingly now in mission mode, fine. When you can't do it through a scheme or a program, you run a mission and then maybe it works. But the big challenge is, how do you integrate across processes? And at the local government level, in actual practice, if you had mayors or you had a more democratic system where there's accountability of the mayor in some senses, then today if your water system doesn't work and your solid waste doesn't work or your jobs are not created, you lose your election. At the moment, of course, there's no accountability, but the real issue is integration across all of these sectors there, so you can run it as a coordinated kind of process. So do you think there's a hope to actually be able to create a cadre of political workers, irrespective of political party, who have an understanding of how to build these coalitions and run them at the local level, assuming that the money actually comes and the framework is open, fine?
You see, more than 40 years ago, leaders like Ramkrishna Hegde or Chauhan created this kind of, why can't we done it again? What's now then for the greater need? I don't know, our colleagues may be able to explain better how Ramkrishna Hegde was able to do this in the state. Maharashtra, I've seen, I mean, I grew up at that time, we were all young students, but it was essentially Yashwanta Chauhan's plus intellectual heft was given by Professor Gadgil. He was at that time a great, he was the first one to bring out the district planning framework, and so he gave the intellectual heft, but political thing came from Chauhan. So you had those leaders who could do it. And so maybe, I don't know, well, it has happened, maybe other states also must have happened, I'm not aware of it, but these two examples I
Rajasthan
know.
happened earlier, and various others, especially even Haryana for that matter, had a whole process that actually enabled Haryana to become what it was,
Yeah.
which was about devolution and enabling this kind of process, etc. So the other question, I mean, sort of tied to this thing, there is you need to have cross-sectoral integration. Otherwise, you cannot deal with these wicked problems like climate change or even job creation. One of the problems that we're having just now is our job creation, systems and processes are all fragmented. You're doing one thing in one ministry, you're doing something somewhere else, and they're not coming together, and the outcomes are not good, as we see. This may be a heterodox kind of a question, because at the moment the accepted norm is, the planning commission and planning and all that kind of stuff is bad. It's an old Soviet idea that doesn't work anymore. How does one coordinate at different levels? At the level, like you said, the Zilla Parishad is one way of doing it, the municipality, at the state level and the national level, across all of these processes, so that somebody can speak to the people who are left behind, because and somebody can speak to the future. Yeah, at the moment nobody is looking at the future. Everybody's looking at this quarter's whatever is budget, next year's thing, or whatever it is. How does one set up a mechanism in the current political economy where that is possible? Because we've lost that capacity. The Finance Commission does its own thing every 5 years. The Planning Commission has become Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog has no money, so it has no leverage. The Finance Ministry does its own stuff, but it's meant to be dealing with budget and macroeconomic issues. RBI's mandate is somewhere else. Is there a role for some way of coordinating this stuff? Or are we going to this completely open market where everybody can do whatever we want and it works itself?
What you say remind me of Mr. Haksar, who was Principal Secretary Prime Minister for many years and was Deputy Chairman Planning Commission. He was telling us, Vijay, in the cabinet, the only person who thinks about India is the Prime Minister of India. Every other person thinks of his caste, his region, his state, or his constituency. Now, other institutions which could think for India as a whole. So we do require some kind of the institutions which have much larger perspective. Planning Commission was not only thinking about India, but also thinking of future. Otherwise, every minister, very short term, even Minister of Finance, Minister of Finance, our responsibility is short term economic stabilization, either inflation or and fiscal deficit, and how to raise resources. We didn't think long term, nothing structural changes. So it requires some integrating institutions. I think we have to reinvent. In fact, I'd argue that we require Niti Aayog 2.0, and I'm given what it can be possibly. So you're right, we require that institution. Right now, other than Prime Minister of India, there is no really person whose role is to think about India.
But at the state level, do you see this as a possibility? Because I mean, so much action happens.
Yeah, Chief Minister.
You think there's some chief ministers who are actually trying to make this happen there? I mean, state planning boards have gone defunct in some places. Some places they're still there. Can there be a push from the middle upwards to say, look, this is the way to work?
I think it's the role of people like us and others to sort of continuously analyze and inform. Because, I mean, as they say, I know they may, you may not like it, but vade jaye tarva bodha. There's no other substitute than discussion and debate. So we have to, more people sort of talk about it and discuss it. Because, I mean, we are not stupid. I mean, we can change. We do change. So that's why I think IIHS is important.
So having said,
I'm sorry to give this marketing line for IIHS, but I genuinely believe it.
The first chancellor of a university who's saying,
I genuinely believe it, because I think this is a very great felt need, and I think institute like IIHS has a very important role to play.
Yeah, just to pick up on that earlier point earlier. So we have these contending models in some senses. There's a Tamil model, there's a Kerala model, there's a Gujarat model. Now there's maybe a UP model of how things should actually play itself and run. Are they? And of course, most of them they have godfathers in international universities who promote them and all that. Apart from the own thing that's there. Are there different ways of thinking about this in the context of the grand bargain that we have just now? Because implicit within this is some states perform better, some cities perform better, and there's been this interesting debate about cooperative and comparative federalism. But the fact is, actually, we have a divergence at the moment. So we have a growing inequality inside the economy and inside society, and we have divergence across states. The question is, how can you govern a landmass which has 1.5 billion people, fine, with some of these ideas that are very 20th century? I mean, how can how can you reimagine the balance? Why would certain places and people willing to stay inside this process to be able to subsidize, a whole range of other folks who would eventually land up at their doorstep because things are not working in their place in some ways, fine? So this is an interesting question. It's South Asia is facing this question in any case, but luckily we are one nation at the moment, and with GST you're trying to create one market. How does one balance across regional inequality?
That's a big question. No easy answers. I can't think of. I mean, Finance Commission is one instrument you have, which try to at least promote the concept of equalizing the at least basic public goods supply and quality. I mean, that's the whole. So far, I think credit to our system. Uh, now the 16th Finance Commission is there. 15th Finance Commission gave the report to independent bodies. It went through without any challenge by politically or legally. So I think we have now got one of the instruments, and that will do one part of the job. But what we're now missing is that equivalence of saying equalizing or going to more equalize the growth rates. One is the consumption, but one of growth. And I chaired when Prithviraj Chavan became Chief Minister of Maharashtra, he asked me to look at this problem in Maharashtra. And it was about 10 years ago we prepared a report and we looked at it. We were a good group. And then our solution was nothing, no great discovery. But we argued that you require compensating investments in the regions in which you want to growth to take place. So if you want to avoid this growing inequality and consequent migration, and then that creates more political problems. So I think people is.
The challenge in that is, the argument, counter argument will be you're going back into license raj, you're going to freight equalization, etc., etc. How can we do it at the stage that we are just now in terms of the scale of the economy? Draw investment into places where you do need investment, but nobody's going to go there because the infrastructure is bad, people are moving out, human capital is poor, etc., etc. How do you take jobs to North and Eastern India?
Public goods. That's where the role of the state comes. And unfortunately, our report, the government accepted the government change and of course language change. But only recently the Kannada government is appointed Professor Dr. Rao,
Yes.
Rao.
Yeah.
Precisely look at this issue. And hopefully, with there's a Nanjadipa committee several years ago in Karnataka. Do you remember? Lakshmi? There was the report Karnataka by Nanjadipa. Do you remember? Do you recall?
On fiscal...
no, this
regional inequality. Nanjundappa.
Correct.
Yes.
It was a very good report. And in fact, that became for us a sort of very useful. And I think it was partly implemented by the Kannada government. So, not fully, but it was. Now they're revisiting it. Revisiting it. So I think we'll have to. It's a solvable problem. It's not as problem that can't be solved. And there has to be debate, discussion. I think I genuinely believe that more discussion, debate is really what's needed, and more knowledge.
So what you're saying is
and again we come back to IIHS.
Yeah, exactly. So the question there is that we do need to deal with regional disbalances at the national level. And this is especially true of urbanization, because at the moment, the trends are pretty clear. We have 5 mega urban clusters that are building out, which are going to drive much of the growth, a lot of the employment. We have another 5 that could become significant. And then the rest of the country is in all kinds of other places. And those are the most sensitive as far as climate change, poverty, collapse of the agrarian economy, etc., is all about. And that's where a lot of the circular and other migration is also going to start. So that rebalancing, I think, is who will finance the rebalancing.
But before we,
Yeah.
but the new joker in the pack, which makes problems somewhat more difficult, but maybe more simpler, is the challenge of climate.
Yeah.
Now, there's a great sense of comradeship, interconnectedness, understanding that affects us all. And really, it doesn't matter where you stay, but climate change is affecting all of us. So that may give greater sense of fraternity and solidarity. May help us to find solutions. I don't know. But this was totally, I mean, when we worked on either Maharashtra or that was never back in our mind, frankly. But now we can't avoid it. That has become a central business changes paradigm, actually, thinking of development, is the climate challenge. And so maybe that can help us to come together and think more rationally. I don't know. It's like, because that, I think, will inspire people to think more rationally. Because it affects everybody. My actions can affect anybody.
Exactly. And of course,
interrelationship now, people are realizing this.
yes, especially if they're farmers and people working
Yeah.
at the front end, you can really see
They
that.
realize.
Or people in the coal mines. I mean, they really
Now,
understand this question.
Punjab farmers' problem doesn't look too distant to me. I know it affects me also. So, hopefully that may help us to find solutions. And younger generation is even more aware and concerned. I mean, my grandson or teenagers, they're far more concerned about it. I can see that. They are quite concerned. So, I think that may become like a new freedom movement. Like freedom movement brought us all together. So this someone like this may happen. I don't know.
Do you think delimitation may be an opportunity to?
It can be turned into opportunity.
Exactly. So how would you see that? Because at the moment there's a lot of anxiety in some parts of the country that delimitation will be used to be able to skew the political balance, because the larger voice will hold in some senses, and political balance and where economic activity, output, and prosperity are not necessarily the same place. So some parts of the country will be able to enforce its will on other parts of the country. So how could delimitation be used?
Yeah, in our this organizing, we require meta balance.
Sorry, a meta grand balance.
Meta grand balance.
Okay, what does that mean?
Grand bargain.
Bargain. Sorry, yeah.
In our in the GST, it was a bargain only in terms of fiscal.
Yes.
But meta will be all institutional also.
Okay.
So we're looking at parliament, station. So we look for a much larger sort of discussion, the grand bargain. But if you can do GST, however faulty it is, which is, I think, grained, is a tribute to Indian. Incidentally, I must all federal systems took much longer than India to get the. I looked at Canada, Australia, Brazil, much longer than what we did. So yes, we do to all done quite better.
Yeah, and of course we've had the advantage now of technology, no? So we can
Not
implement, execute.
Political technology is an agreement.
Yeah.
Getting it together, that was political. And I think I was very impressed by, if you ask me, by our political, the way they bargained, the way they trade-off were made. Brazil is still struggling, incidentally.
Yes, especially that back and forth now that Lula is
But
back.
God forbid they want to. The Brazilian government wants to look at our experience. Hopefully they'll do better than us. So what I'm saying that I think you can't get.
So to try and paraphrase what I've understood, you're saying that we need a new meta grand bargain,
Yes.
which will involve not only fiscal processes, which is finance commission, other flows, GST, etc., which is the financial flows, but also the political engagement, representation in
powers.
Yeah, and powers inside the
interjurisdictional powers. Different jurisdictions have different powers, and
So in that, you're saying, a new, let's say, you could probably use delimitation to be able to, at least in terms of perception, change the balance of what's happening or what the operations are in parliament. But similarly at state level, and similarly bringing in
One, a cute idea, which, as I said, we are now preparing for this conference, working on it, is smaller states. Lot of problems can be smaller states. So that's one.
it's been on the agenda for a long time, and we
Yeah,
tried
but
that
I'm
with
saying-
Bihar, Jharkhand. We tried that with Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh.
No, Maharashtra also, smaller states. So
And the monster in the room there is UP, of course, and the four
No,
parts.
I remember when we were with the Finance Commission, we spoke to Mayawati, that time she was Chief Minister. She was quite willing to think about it. Incidentally, it is a great loss to India that she didn't, she got sort of
Sideline politically.
sidelined. She would have been a great Prime Minister of India. Very, very entrepreneurial, which India needs. Entirely willing to take risks in the policy risks. And she was willing to think about it on smaller states. So you make some politician like this.
So you're saying smaller states.
I was talking about Mayawati.
Mayawati and Purvanchal and breaking up UP into 3 states, etc.
And we had a meeting. It's all the
Chief ministers.
Chief Minister. Let me tell you, amongst all the meetings, she was the most forward-looking in many ways, and many ways revolutionary in thinking. Very amazing. And mind you, UP woman, and but she was willing to take risks.
So part of this sort of meta grand bargain, do you think local third tier is also part of that process?
Yeah, of course.
So you're saying third tier changes at the state level with a bicameral legislature which
Correct,
has more
correct,
representation by rule as far as that's concerned.
And sharing of fiscal resources.
What about the judiciary?
Judiciary, of course, is a different cup of tea. All of us will hold up for contempt of court, but we have to really think deeply about it. In some cases, it's not fair to them because everything is loaded on Supreme Court now. The other courts don't exist, which is absurd.
Yeah.
So we have to really start, there our Milan is a better person to speak about. But as a layman person, I believe that it's really, one man who wanted to change it. Again, Dr. Wiley. Dr. Wiley, when he was brought out national litigation policy, that was the beginning of change. So had he done that, a lot of things would have happened. But then, of course, but I'm not an expert, and Amlan may be able to tell us better. But that's a big one. And
Okay. Sorry? 4 Supreme Courts. Yeah. Yeah, like the South Africans have done also.
Yeah, many other things we have to do in the judicial area.
Okay, so I think we're going to open this up. There are lots of people in the room. I'm sure we're going to have a very rich discussion on this. Just to quickly paraphrase, 3 or 4 things that we touched on. One was on the flow of funds. So the idea is money has to flow into the third tier, whether it's rural or urban areas as far as that's concerned. There are multiple mechanisms to make it happen. GST is one, the Finance Commission is the other, budgetary support is the third. But basically, if there is cash, you can leverage that from the market. You have some liquidity which can actually enable the delivery of better public goods and services.
And then you can get capital markets.
Exactly. So I think you engage capital markets, maybe even investment on the investment side. So that's one whole story. The second thing is this idea of this grand balance in some senses between states, between regions inside states that needs to get political representation, essentially incentivize an entire generation of political leaders who actually understand these processes and in a changing India are actually able to work on these things because they have the experience of making that happen, and create the space for that to happen. Because if you still have elites from Delhi controlling stuff, it's not going to actually work. You just cannot govern a thing. Inside that, obviously, a whole range of innovative ideas of, smaller states become more governable, trying to change the nature of state legislatures, especially at that level, using delimitation as an opportunity at the national level. And then a big question mark as far as what happens to the judiciary. Fine. So we've covered a lot of ground in what we're talking about. But anyway, open house and let people come in.
Let the wise
Amlan,
man,
can we have somebody else come in? Yeah.
we got a very wise man here. Let him speak.
Yes, please. Yeah.
From?
KFW.
Okay.
You are talking about better governance through smaller states, but now we are seeing a reverse trend in the cities. The cities are becoming greater. Initially they were all so-called Vizag is now Greater Vizag. Hyderabad is Greater Mumbai. We are now agglomerating in terms of cities and all, and the governance is getting impossible. So there is a conflict of how we have to view. What is your view, or how do we take this forward?
Metropolitan area management. All the stuff that Dr. Ravindra and others have been struggling with for many, many years. MPCs and where the 74th Amendment might be, etc. Yeah. Please, we'll take a few questions together. Yeah, we'll take 2-3 questions together. Yeah. Please, Somnath.
Sir, thank you so much for enlightening discussions. I have one question. I mean, your view of having some part for the, especially the urban local bodies in the GST. So in the devolution pool, if there is some part which is assigned for the urban local bodies. Now, on so this should fall on the central government or the state government. My first question is that, and if it is falling on the state government, that the devolution of the GST should be done to the urban local bodies, it's the state finance commission which has to do that, and the condition of the state finance commission has not been good. We also see a case in Gujarat where the state finance commissions have not been formed, but there is a formula-based devolution, and that system has worked well. So I just wanted to have your views on that, whether the state finance commission formation is better or there should be a formula-based devolution which should be across the state.
Can we any other third question, folks? Yeah, please. Mike here. Thank you.
Sir, I just wanted to ask one particular question. Now, in terms of
Can
you're
just
talking
introduce
about.
yourself?
Hi, my name is Roshan. I wanted to ask a specific question on, on the taxes and money flowing into the third tier. Presently, if you look at it, even in a city like Bangalore, we've not been able to manage our property taxes. As what I mean by managing property taxes, a large percentage of money is not being recovered as yet. So, adding more money. I mean, I don't think there's a dearth of money. It's just the problem that they are not able to manage the money better. So, what do you think? If you have to go to the capital market, you have to have all your balance sheet and everything cleaning. It needs to be professionally managed more than the way the government functions right now. I mean, the tier 3 government functions. So how do you think that reform needs to be brought in? Like the IAS cadre plays a role in managing the cities, managing the state, and the other aspects. Do you think there's a need for similar cadre at local governance level?
Last question here, then I'll ask Vijay to respond. We'll do another round after this.
Abhishek Kumar from Indic Associates. Sir, I've read you so many times. I was also public policy director at CUTS International. So, of course, always had the pleasure to sort of know you from a distance. Question is that.
Sir, thank you so much for enlightening discussions. I have one question. I mean, your view of having some part,
Because ultimately, from access to amenities and basic human development, this differentiation only looks artificial.
So, lots of questions.
I'll take the easy question, difficult answer. The first question about our friend made whether same argument was given to give independence to India by Britishers. We don't know if they give the powers, whether they handle it or not. I think if you have both resources available, they can hire better people. There are plenty of human capital available in the marketplace. So I'm not worried about whether we'll have people or not. I mean, many people were happy to work in the city where they're born and work for the city rather than go and work somewhere else. So I don't think that, and with all due respect, the governance in the center and the state is not also not of so high standard that one should worry about not meeting those standards. So I won't worry too much about this. It depends. There's very crudely somebody put it. If you give peanuts, monkeys will come. So it depends what you pay. So if you adequately compensate, adequate authority there, don't worry about getting human capital or expertise at local level. I don't think that's a constraint. So I really not thought about it. I'm a city boy, to be honest. So I can't really give you a response to an important question. So that I will accept. And your question was about
Megacities.
there is a very
metropolitan governance.
that's a metropolitan governance is a very important part of this hierarchy of agglomeration. So some metros may be bigger than some states, and then there will be within that there will be decentralization. So we'll have metro regions like Mumbai Metro is larger than many states in India. So they will have internally think about decentralization. But there should be resources and responsibility should be co-located. That's really the point I'm trying to make. That today that's disjointed. I have a responsibility, but I don't have resources. So that I think. And there's one more question. One more. Somebody asked?
No, the formula-based thing. GST to formula.
I think it should be combination of both, as some remarked. SFC derives what Central Finance Commission gives, because GST is only one indirect taxes. I'm not talking that's all the devolutions takes place. Devolution also of your other revenues of central government, namely the direct taxes, corporate taxes, personal taxes. So we'll have both the devolution and direct. But our argument is to go directly flow the consolidated fund of third tier. Should not be mediated through state governments. Because today, yeah, because that's what's happening. As I mentioned to you, once you leave it to the authorities, that's what's happening. The government of India is not transferring to states money which is awarded by the Finance Commission. So, and thank God we have. Otherwise, because today, by Constitution, the devolution happens without money before enters the Constitutional Fund of India. Left to Finance Ministry, they would not have given the money, knowing the Finance Ministry.
So if you're there in the morning, this is like the power grid example, where the CEO is basically transferring the money on the second week of April to the farmers. He's saying now you have the technology to do it because it's all electronic at the moment. Frictionless as far as that's concerned. Transfer the resources and then see what happens.
Yeah, it should be automatic. Don't depend on anybody's goodwill.
Yeah. Okay, next round of questions, folks. Please.
Yeah, hi, I'm Debarpita from Center for Social and Economic Progress, New Delhi, CSEP. Yeah, so my question to you, sir, is it's not a question, it's rather a question I had on my mind for long and in my studying of municipal finances. 1%, Aromar, you said 1% of GDP is what ULB spend. But ULB spend only probably half of what is being spent on city services. The rest is being spent by state government agencies, parastatals.
Yeah.
That's another 1%, right? What the ULPs do is completely almost controlled by what the state government wants them to do. Okay. In terms of raising taxes, in terms of their functions, in terms of half their manpower would also be from the state government. Okay. So the urban development problem, when we keep on saying is a problem of ULBs, not the problem, the solution is the ULBs. But ULPs are essentially just implementing agencies without the requisite agency being given to them, as envisioned in the 74th Amendment, because it's the 18 list of functions which were supposed to be devolved were just you can devolve as state governments. Some have devolved 4, some have devolved 11, etc. So in this scenario, should we rather talk about what state governments should be doing in terms of revitalizing our cities through ULPs? And when we talk about ULBs, are we completely, missing the main moot problem? No matter how much we talk about ULBs, these guys don't have the agency. So I was very happy, you were the first person to say that give them more funds, the responsibility, the functions will follow. Because the general discourse that I have been hearing in this space for the last so many years, especially from urban governance development practitioners, is that don't pour money into a leaking bucket. It will only leak. Your reflections, sir, on this.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's an old debate, but it's a very important one. I'm glad you brought it back in the room. Somebody in the back wanted, yeah, please.
Hello, my name is Pranav. I'm the current UFP fellow for this year. And, I've worked as an urban policy researcher for a brief period. And what I've understood is most of the power in the city lies, more than the mayor, lies with the commissioner of the city. And at the heart of all of this are ultimately people. And what we've seen is that in city politics, people have been very, very lethargic. So, how do we change that, and how do we make it more democratic? Because most of the bureaucrats have always been out of bounds for most citizens in a city. So when we are giving this power to the mayor, we know as a matter of fact that the bureaucrats are also going to be an integral part of this. And how do we make this a smooth functioning unit that serves the city, and how do we make them more capable, and there's good capacity, because to understand that the demands and needs of the city are being met, especially in the current pressing issues of climate change and equity for all.
Okay, that's the agency question. Any other? Can I give the last thing to anybody else? I'll give the last one to Amlan, and then we'll close. Cool. Going, huh? 5, 4, whatever. Okay, I'm done.
I sense a pre-74th Amendment situation right now. And if we were today, the 74th Amendment would not possibly have been even drafted. That's the political economy situation I sense. I may be completely mistaken. And I sense that out of a larger climate of democratic distrust and a kind of view that technocratic governance, i.e., China, Singapore, are able to more efficiently manage, and therefore, whereas we leverage large scale investments, especially in infrastructure, at a large scale, including not just municipalities but larger city regions and what have you, the SPVization of city governance is the way to go, because that's the only way to manage investments better. How does one counter that in the current political climate?
He's actually asked another. I mean, this is just a little bit of a comment to, I think, both the questions. The leaking bucket question, this is an old debate that's there, but it's a very important one. You put it very clearly that you shouldn't be putting money where it will be wasted, vis-a-vis your option, which is somewhat different from a lot of other people. The second question is, we've been, at least in our own experience here in UPD, because we've kind of led a lot of this discussion the last 3 or 4 years, is there was a moment, I would say a year and a half, 2 ago, before the election, where there was an idea that you really wanted to enforce or enable big picture urban reforms. Some of the kind of things that you're talking about just now, right? At the political level and potentially at the fiscal level, actually, and it really happened. We ran a very big consultation here with all the all the senior leadership of all the southern states. Similar one was run in Jaipur. It percolated all the way up through the government of India, reached like literally the top, and then suddenly it fell apart. Fine. And I think one of the reasons that it fell apart was, part of the argument was, we need to do exactly what you're saying. Take the list of 18, add on a few more, and change, how the 74th CA is done, where you make it mandatory for the devolution to take place. which is part of what Vijay is saying. But where it got unstuck, in my understanding, was it got unstuck around the GST Council question, where basically you said, if you want to make this happen, we were making the same argument that you've got to sort the GST stuff outside. And I think the political economy of where the GST was at that point of time, maybe a little different from what it was, made it impossible for the center at least to be able to bring the states on board to say, okay, we will have rule-based transfers and we will do transfers, as you're saying, to the. So my sense is, and I may be completely wrong on this, is what Amnan is saying is we may be entering a regime which may be willing to go back on the 74th Amendment. Fine. Remember, there was a moment in the 80s where Rajiv Gandhi got, whatever it is, enamoured by this idea. There was a failure in Parliament around the first 69th, etc. Those of us who saw this. So, is there a risk of that? Is it better for us to look at incremental change at the moment? You're talking about really big bang, long-term structural changes. Where will the balance play out in the political economy? And who are the allies to making this happen? Because for some of us, it's pretty obvious. These are deep systemic changes. You've got to go for the big picture. If you don't do that, you're going to be playing this incremental game forever, and things are going to go downhill, meaning city governments are going to go out. And some states have done that. I mean, Odisha has done that in some cases. Other states have done it. So how does one make that happen, I guess, is one of the questions we have. Because you managed in the Finance Commission this question of the discussion with the states and arriving at a consensus, which is a very, very tough thing to do. And now you're talking about multiple consensus around GST, around the Finance Commission functioning as far as it's concerned, around the political arrangements, maybe around delimitation, etc. So this is a big move in some senses. So sorry.
I have a small question to add. Sorry, I'm Sunil, working with IIHS only. In addition to the agency question, the role of citizens, how do you see that? And I mean, what kind of changes is required? Because there is no demand. We're not sensitive enough to our neighbors, our cities, our service providers. We are not sensitive to their requirement. Even we are not sensitive to our needs. We only debate in the drawing room, dining room, but we don't ask our elected representatives that this is what we need, and you give it. So how do you bring that agency to citizens also? I mean, and how important is that?
And a naive proposal would be start with empowered mayors. Why Mr. Kejriwal is essentially mayor, but he has access to GST, he has access to resources, he has changed the supply of public goods, and he gets re-elected again and again and again, in spite of onslaught. So maybe just have empowered mayors first. Once you get and give him the resources, you will find the able people able to supply public goods. I think one of the reasons why our government is succeeding because they have resources. Because it's a big name called state, but actually city. So but they get GST because it's called state. You get complete autonomy. And they're able to do it. So why can't it be done other places? I'm sure Mumbai will be able to do it. They'll be fine. Mumbai will get some, Bangalore gets some very, very talented politician if I'm elected mayor with this kind of resource. So I don't think it's not undoable because there are enough political talents and savvy as long as resources are there. And I don't think we'll go back. That train has already left. We can't go back now. Just look at the degree of urbanization in this country now. How can you say people will not accept greater powers or urban? It's not facts. I mean, as I said, that train has left. So I'm not worried about going back to old world. In fact, new world is going to be like Delhi. And so that could be a...
Delhi in terms of its air quality or in terms of its activity?
No, in terms of supply of public goods, there's some... Air quality is a good example because climate change, as I said, is going to make it complicated. But number of other public goods of city, certainly they've improved Delhi much more than Mumbai or many other cities I know. So maybe that's a solution.
Last point. Okay, cool.
It's not still a city. You call it state. Because that's why I'm saying if you give access to elected mayor and access to GST, he'll be become like
the question: which chief minister is going to create the elected mayor?
he himself may become chief minister himself preferred to become mayor of city. It's much more manageable this challenge.
In terms of
And
seeking, of course, that's a more.
no, a talented politician would like to say, look, I'd rather do elected mayor of Bangalore and show the results. And then I become national leader. If you look at all the, even the president of China was mayor of Shanghai. That's a very bad reputation. So you can make reputation by successful executive. Maybe he'll be very happy. Your deputy chief minister of this state will be very happy to empower mayor of Bangalore.
And then catapult to the center. Okay, we'll close with that very provocative suggestion. Pratima, over to you. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. And thank you, Vijay.
Not at all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kelkar and Aro. This was a really wide-ranging and mind-expanding conversation and a fitting end to today. So thank you so much. So with that, we've come to the end of today's proceedings. It's been deeply engaging and thought-provoking right from the start of the day up till now. I thank all the panelists, the moderators, the guests, participants, and audience for having been here, present, actively engaging with all the conversations. So thank you once again.